Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bite Size History. I'll be your host, Audrey Durham, and in today's episode, we are going to be focusing on geography and maps. If you like this show, please make sure that you are hitting that like and subscribe, and also make sure that you leave a comment down below after the video to let me know if you have any questions about maps or if there's anything you would like to see on the show. You can also find me on Patreon under Bite Size History with Audrey Durham. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our benchmark, learning goal, and learning targets before we get into today's lesson. Is understand how to use maps and other geographic representations, tools, and technology to report information. Our learning goals for today include utilizing tools geographers use to study the world and to differentiate between continents, regions, countries, and cities in order to understand the complexities of regions created by civilizations. Learning target for today is going to be, you should, by the end of this episode, be able to analyze maps, globes, graphs, and charts for geographical data. For our critical thinking concepts, we are focusing on what tools do geographers use to study the world, understanding the basics of reading a map, understanding elevations and physical features on maps, what are the cardinal directions, and identifying the locations of the 4 major oceans and the 7 major continents. Some of the basics about understanding maps. A map is a diagrammatic representation of an area of land or sea showing physical features, cities, roads, etc. Basically, whatever needs to be created by the cartographer, which is a map maker, is what is going to show up on the map. Now, a legend or a key is often found on maps as well. And as it pertains to a map, a legend or a key is a guide to explain what that map says or is portraying, such as land elevations, population densities, or other various details for different locations. Our primary cardinal directions are north, south, east, and west. Now, we do have variations that exist, such as northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest, and everything in between. But for our primary lessons, we're going to be focusing on north, south, east, and west. North is always going to be at the top. South is going to be at the bottom. East is going to be on the right of our compass rose, and west is going to be on the left of our compass rose. This is to help us orient ourselves to maps as we're looking at them to make sure that we're getting the best basis of information whenever we are studying a specific location. Look at is a world map with physical geographical features. And on this map, we have some key things that we're going to look for. First up are the continents. So we have any of the world's main continuous expanses of land is basically what we consider a continent. And what they include for us is Asia, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, Europe, North America, and South America. So those are our 7 major continents. The next thing we can see on our map is the oceans. Now, the ocean is defined as a large expanse or a very large expanse of sea, and in particular, each of the main areas into which the sea is divided geographically. And what we mean by geographically divided is by land masses. So we have the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and the Arctic Ocean. And they are all divided up by the major land masses. So you can see there is not much that would let any of the Pacific Ocean cross over and touch the Atlantic Ocean. So that's what we mean by geographically divided. And that's also why our sea or our ocean down here at the bottom of our map in the south, the Southern Ocean, is not considered one of the 4 major oceans. And that's because it's not really geographically divided from the other main 3, such as the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Indian. Those ocean waters sort of just blend and flow together. However, it does touch Antarctica, and I think that's really why they made its own ocean as the Southern Ocean. Another thing that we are going to quick point out on this map is the physical geographical features. So when we think of that, it's actually what you might see, say, from space or from a really far distance away from the Earth, which would be all the blue from the oceans. We have the sandy, light brown colors from the deserts, such as the Sahara Desert, which shows up really prominently. And then we also have these green areas, which show that there's a lot of vegetation or heavy forests. At the far north and at the far south of our map, we can see the icy areas or the ice sheets, such as Greenland and Antarctica, and those are denoted by the white and the gray colors that they have on them. Last thing we're going to talk about on this map is the equator, which creates our northern and southern hemispheres. Now, the equator is the warmest spot on the Earth, and it goes all the way around, acting as a belt, and that is because that is where the sun hits the Earth the most consistently throughout the year. It's also why we can see some very forested areas along the equator, and those are actually the tropical rainforests. Now, everything above the equator is the northern hemisphere, and everything below the equator on our map is the southern hemisphere. The farther away from the equator you get, regardless of direction, the colder it's going to get throughout the year. All right, so our next map is a world map with country borders. Now, this map is very specific. It has our first key that we're going to look at. And what this key does is it tells us that some of the countries on this map could not fit their whole names where the country is located. So instead, we have numbers by these different names. So here in Europe, where we can see there is a lot of very small countries, they have a bunch of different numbers. So say number 10 here is going to be Austria. We can tell that Austria is a smaller country versus Russia, which has a much bigger landmass. That's another thing about the borders and why it's important to have a map like this, so you can understand both the size of some of the countries that exist as well as their size in comparison to some of the other countries. So in one of our maps, we're going to be looking at a population density, and it's going to help because when we see, say, India versus Russia, we're going to have very different population densities. It's the same thing with Europe and, say, northern Canada. So these are going to be very different in population density, but you can see that Russia and northern Canada are very large land masses. But again, when we are looking at our last map, we can see that if the equator is here, then these guys are going to be a bit colder, and not as many people maybe want to live up in the cold. So the next map that we are going to talk about is the California topographical map. And this map is going to be very unique for us. So first of all, it does have a key or legend. And on this map, the key or legend shows the land elevations as well as map features such as rivers and cities. And then on our map, circling my key, we can see that our elevation here is color-coded. So as we are out in the ocean, we can see that it is most likely going to be somewhere below 10,000 feet below sea level. And then as we get closer to shore, it gets up to sea level and 5,000 feet below. When we are looking at our elevations in the Mojave Desert, one of the things that can really stand out to us is all of the red shades and the fact that it basically is anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000 feet above sea level just in the Mojave Desert. Moving into the Great Valley. The Great Valley is going to be anywhere from sea level to 500 feet, and in some places around the edges, going to be about 1,000 feet above sea level. And then finally, we have our Sierra Nevada mountains. And in the Sierra Nevada mountains, it goes above 14,000 feet. So we are 14,000 feet or more above sea level in elevation. And on the on the right side, you can see that we have meters as well. So we have 5,000 meters above sea level. And what they did on this map is one of our things that we can look at here is the peaks of different mountains. So in the Sierra Nevadas, we have this little star here that has a peak, and that is telling us the elevation in meters. Next thing we're going to look at is our label portion of the key. And in that, we actually can see the state capital is Sacramento because it is the star with the circle around it. So Sacramento is the city-state capital of California. We can see the borders. So we have the state border, which is here, and that divides or separates California from Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona. We also have our international border down at the bottom, which not only separates California, but it separates the United States from Mexico. Next up, we have our rivers. So up here in the north, we can see that the solid blue line is actually a permanent river or canal. And what that means is that that is going to be there year-round. Whereas in the Mojave Desert, we have a broken blue line, which means that is an intermittent river. So that river most likely dries up at some point during the year. It's not there year-round. Next, we have our cities, and they are showing us how big the populations are in these different cities. So the major cities in California, such as Los Angeles and San Diego, are going to have a city population of 1 million or more people. And then in the middle of California, we have San Francisco and San Jose. And those cities, as denoted on our key, are going to have a city population of 500,000 to 1 million people. And then finally, what we're going to look at is the scale on our map here. So our scale is showing us miles and kilometers, and basically if we were to draw a line from the coast into the Great Valley in the south, we would see that it's probably somewhere around 100 miles, maybe a little bit more, or 150 kilometers from the coast of California straight or directly into the Great Valley in Southern California. So that's one of the ways that you would be able to use a scale on a map like this. So the next map is our world map with population density. And this map has another key for us, which is down here on the bottom left. And the bottom left is showing us the color variations that we're looking for to figure out what the population density of people is per square kilometer. Now, first up, we are going to look at India. And India, as we can see, has some very high population densities. And the reason why we can tell that is by all of the darker shades of red and dark brown that we can see in India. So even though India is a bit of a smaller country like we were talking about before, it's got anywhere from 500 or 1,000 people to above 1,500 people per square kilometer, depending on where you're looking. Now, Next, we have northern Canada. And like I was discussing before, even though northern Canada is very large, it has a very low population density, which is 0 to 5 people or persons per square kilometer, which is similar to Siberia and northern Russia. So these areas, most likely because they are very cold, but regardless, they have a population density of 0 to 5 people per square kilometer. Then when we look at Central Africa, we can see that the variations go from the lighter brown, which is 5 to 25 people per square kilometer, all the way up to 500 or 1,000 people per square kilometer in some of these darker brown areas here. Then we have the eastern coast of the United States, which includes some of these darker shades of 500 to 1,000, which is up in the northeast. And down in the south, you can see that there's still some areas that don't have as high of a population density, like especially farther south in Florida, where there are some small spaces that have 0 to 5 people per square kilometer, and then all the way up to 500 or 1,000 people on the Gulf Coast per square kilometer. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching another episode of Bite Size History. I hope you found it enjoyable and you have a little bit better understanding of maps and geography. Next episode, we are going to be focusing on more maps, but ancient civilizations and how they spread. If you have any questions, again, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, as well as drop those questions down into the comment section below. As always, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can also find me on Patreon as Bite Size History with Audrey Durham and on Instagram at Bite Size History with Audrey D. Thank you so much for watching. This show was written and produced by me, Audrey Durham. I look forward to sharing more episodes of Bite Size History with you soon.